All right, everybody, we're going to get started. I want to introduce to you, and I want you to welcome, come on, let's give a warm round of applause, James Hurley from Hillsong. And a microphone.
Hey, I think I know how to use these things. I hope I do anyway. How's everybody doing? Good, good. It's good to see you all here. This is a really great event. I'm honored to be a part of it. So they asked me to do a bit of a session on mixing 201. So it kind of assumes that there's some stuff you already know, like what an EQ is or what a compressor is. So some of the terms and stuff I'm not really going to define. I'm just going to breeze over. I'm going to try and talk about practical applications of those things at the next level, but also not necessarily at the really, really high operating level. Cool? Let me see if I can get my notes running here. There we go. Okay. I talk about this a lot. When you are approaching anything in church, you want to bring your best. So we use this term called prior preparation prevents poor performance. Many of you have probably heard that before, but Dennis actually alluded to it this morning in his talk, which was amazing. I actually enjoyed quite a lot. But you got to know, before you go into mix as an engineer, somebody who's been doing it for a while, you got to know what you're doing, right? You got to know your songs. So listen to new songs and know your set list. If you're using PCO or any other rostering application that sends out your set list, you're going to want to know what they are. If there's something on there that you don't know, you're going to want to go find it on Spotify, or if it's a new song demo that your church has put out, you want to download it and listen to it, learn the parts. The kind of an inexcusable for me is if my worship pastor comes to me and goes, hey, we're doing this brand new song that we're trying out for album. Do you know the parts? And I say, actually, no, I haven't heard it. That may or may not have happened to me once with somebody like a Joel Houston, to which he threw the album at me from the floor, which was pretty funny. He goes, what? You haven't had the album? Turns around to one of our hosts, goes, do we have an album to give out? She's like, yeah, takes it, and he just chucks it up. He goes, here, you should have had that a long time ago. Anyway, so got to know the songs. Know your genre. So there's a lot of churches out there in the country, and not all of them play Hillsong. Not all of them play Bethel or Jesus Culture. Not all of them play Elevation Church. Some of them, like the one I grew up in, still plays a lot of Vineyard or stuff from the 90s or whatever, and there's nothing wrong with that. Every church has a culture. Every church has a style, right? And a genre. So you got to know what your genre is. If I went to, say, Hillsong College, which I did, and I came back to the church that I grew up in, which is doing stuff that's completely left of field to what I had just learned, and I tried to mix all of that stuff the way we do it in Sydney or at any one of our campuses, I wouldn't be doing that church, that ministry, any justice, any service, right? I'm not presenting the vocals way up forward. I'm not, using horns. I'm over-mixing the bass. And the worship pastor is going to go, I thought you just did all this great stuff at Hillsong. And I'm going to go, well, I did. Doesn't it sound great? And he's going, no, it doesn't sound great. It sounds like Hillsong, but we're not Hillsong. So know your genre, right? I touched on know your parts already. Sorry, it's backwards. And know your effects. So there's a lot of new stuff coming out from one of our young teams, Hillsong Young and Free. And it caused me, I consider myself an old guy, even though I'm not too terribly old, but I came out of the Savior King days or the United of that time, which sounds very different to the stuff that we're doing now. So when the Young and Free stuff came out, which I'm going to be honest, I didn't quite like it, but I had to learn to love it. And now I do love it. I enjoy mixing it. I had to really analyze the effects because they do things differently and they purposefully use effects different than any of the stuff we had done before. There's delay throws, there's ping pong delays, there's things in there that are purposefully done to add to the song and keep the younger generation interested. Young generation is listening to top 40 these days. It doesn't matter how old you are as a sound engineer, are you listening to the top 40? Do you know what their ears are tuned to hear, what their ears are expecting to hear in the stuff that they're singing? Especially if you're mixing a youth event where they're going to be doing a lot of these new younger songs. Know what effects are relevant and what effects aren't relevant. Giant hall reverbs on a young and free song, not relevant. Splashy reverbs, splashy short delays, delay throws, things like that, very, very relevant. Maybe a telephone delay, very relevant. So know what you've got coming at you, know what you need to present, right? Know what's going to be presenting that stuff, okay? We test all of our, and I'll go over this again later, we test all of our speaking mics every single service block before we go up, okay? So I know the preachers. I'll know who's emceeing my services, and I'll know who's speaking. So if it's Brian, our senior pastor, I'll know that he'll come up and he'll use the mic like this, and it's yay distance away, and he'll have a big boisterous voice. It's deep, but it's also barky, and I'm going to test my mics like this. I'm not going to test my mics like this. Carl Lentz, circa 2010, 2011, he was like this, locked into his chin, and he would yell. I'm not going to do it now because it'll blow you away. But this is how I check his mic. Nowadays, Carl Lentz is more like this. Okay? Ben Houston out in LA, he's like this. Okay? This is where he likes to live. It's difficult if the PA is a little bit closer and the room smaller, but this is where he lives, and this is where I've got to know it's going to be good. Okay? So I know who's speaking, and I know what they're going to want to hear in my wedges, or their wedges, what they're going to want to hear from the PA, where they're going to want to be comfortable. A lot of our female speakers, they want to know that their voice is going to be warm. They're very conscious of this. They expect that their voice is going to be as warm as the guys. So we try to boost a broad bell at around 200 for them. We teach them about keeping their mic close to, utilize that proximity effect, all that stuff. There's a two-way conversation there. But I know if they're going to be up, so I prepare for that, and I test them. Mic technique we went over, and the monitor preference is a big deal. Carl in New York loves to hear his wedges, and I quote, like a rap concert. I'm not even kidding. If he gets up and the wedges don't blow him away, he knows, and he'll ask me about it. He doesn't yell at me. Carl's a very gracious man. One of the first hard conversations I ever had with Carl was about his wedges. So we were doing, at the time, 4 services, 2 in the morning, 2 at night. And he was wondering why from the morning to the night his wedges were changing. So he pulled me into his green room and he said, can you explain to me why it's different? Is there not a preset that we can just call up and it's the same? At that time, we were at Irving Plaza. And Irving Plaza is all analog. There was a Sienna at monitors and a Heritage 3000 in front of house. And a bunch of old Claire wedges, of which any number could be blown. So you get what you get from the night before. It's a club. And very often they were blown. So I had to explain to him, I was like, well, we have different engineers on, because we can't have people on all day, because it will really, really tire them out. We have different wedges that we get. We do try to listen to them, and there really isn't a preset. We just know what you like to hear. So he goes, okay, is there anything I can do better? And I went, no, you're great. You're doing exactly what you need to do. He goes, okay, cool. Well, as long as you're, trying to go for what I want, then awesome. You're doing a fantastic job. So that's my leader giving me a hard conversation. I walked away feeling awesome, but it made it quite clear to me that he pays attention. That was the first moment that it made it clear to me he pays attention to his wedges. He's now doing 6 services, I think, on a Sunday, and we made other changes. I'll talk a little bit about this later in the day, but we made other changes to alleviate that. Your pastor's preaching 6 services on a Sunday, his voice is going to go. You got to make sure that his wedges are right there to support him, so he's not going to blow his own voice. Because if he doesn't hear it, he's going to push. And whether or not you think that that's appropriate, that's just what happens. And people are people. They forget. They don't think about these things. I might, but I'm not preaching. So I've got to make sure he's equipped with what he needs to stay strong and focused throughout the day. Same with my band. Know my players. I know the drummers, how they hit. I know the guitar players, what amps they have, what pedals they have, what guitars they have. I know what they like to hear. And I do this through relationship, and I spend time with my teams, and I learn, and I take notes. Because if I don't know what's going to come at me, I'm not prepared as a mix engineer, okay? This is all part of this. I know this doesn't sound like, oh, what EQ do you do and what compressor do you do? No, it starts here. It starts with with that prep, right? I know playing styles, too. One of our drummers in New York hits very consistent. I know I don't have to compress him as hard. I know that, his cymbals are going to be loud. He's a loud cymbal guy. That's not true of all consistent drummers. Some drummers are very consistent and don't hit their cymbals hard. Another drummer we have out in LA, not consistent. Takes a lot of work. I use dynamics to control his dynamics, and there's a conversation that's had throughout the course of time where he gets better and he works on his skills, but I still need to know what he's going to do so that my service and my presentation and my skill set is good and going to support the service, right? Is this good? Is this helpful? Yeah? Cool. So know your content, know your players, know your music. Now we get into some other stuff. Once you know all that stuff, you start to prepare your console, right? Whatever it is, digital or analog. This is a big deal for me. The difference between a beginner and a novice is competency and preparation of the tools, right? So a guy or a girl who's brand new is trying to learn the console. They're trying to figure out where the gain is, which fader does what. If I put this fader up, is that going to turn it up in the house, or am I in a flip mode, and is that going to turn it up in some wedge or some effect? A novice engineer, he's not worrying about that anymore. He's prepared his console, he knows where everything is, and he's starting to think about, I like this verb and this delay. I like, let's say it's a Yamaha digital console, I like this EQ type, not this EQ type. I like this premium rack plugin. I don't like this one. Those are the things that are going through his head. So he's going to use his offline editors. I have almost every offline editor for every console I ever walk into on that computer. That computer lives with me, goes with me everywhere. I have a show file that works for me as starting point for every console I could ever walk into because I want to be prepared. Now I'll go in, take that show file, and customize it show to show or service to service. Sorry, I say show. I come from New York. When you deal with those venues, you start to say things like show instead of service. It's semantics, but sorry if that's what I mean. I mean service. And I'm going to know if I'm walking into a digital console, is the firmware on the console up to date and stable? Okay? We have Pro 3 and Pro 6 in New York. I personally own a Pro 1. And anybody who's owned any digital console knows you don't install the latest firmware unless the latest firmware is confirmed to fix something. This may have bitten me in the butt one Easter, and I may or may not have not had a console for services. Not necessarily my fault. I was advised to do something that I shouldn't have done, but I learned. And I told the guy who advised me, don't ever do that. I had to downgrade a console, a Midas console. If you've ever had a downgraded Midas console, it's pretty tough. Justin Friesen, if he's here or wherever, he can attest to that. Downgrading Midas consoles, very tough. So now I ask, is it stable? I'll call my Midas rep, I'll call my Behringer rep, I'll call my Roland rep, whoever it is, and go, what is the industry saying which firmware is stable? And I'll make sure that my stuff has that firmware. I'll call the companies we're hiring from, and I'll say, have you had any problems? What firmware is loaded? Is it stable? Where am I at? Okay. Analog consoles, the preparation for this is a little different. You have to show up earlier, label your stuff, get your inserts patched in. Irving Plaza's, sorry, that note's not supposed to be in there, but it's telling me to tell you about Irving Plaza. Irving Plaza, like I said, Heritage 3K, 48 channels, I believe. Bunch of outboard. There's probably 16 compressors, 8 gates, tons of reverbs and stuff. It's never patched the same. They have tails. So what they do is they have an engineer come meet you at the console and go, okay, what do you want plugged in where? So my job as a front of house guy was to get there early enough to meet that guy and go, can you put these compressors on these channels, and I'll set them. or these gates on these channels, and I'll set them. If I didn't do that, I was stuck with my gains and EQs, straight to the VA, which, by the way, if you're learning, it's a really great place to start. Somebody's going to give me a warning of how much time I got, right? Ooh, did that go to the right one? No, it's progressing. Hold on a second. Let's see if I can get it to go backwards. Where are we at? Prepare your console? Yeah, it did go the right way. Tune the PA. My brand new engineers, I don't expect them to do this. My novice engineers, I do expect them to start thinking about this. Okay? Know what your setup is. Know what tuning is in place. Belasco Theater has a D&B rig and has absolutely no tuning. Go into R1, which is their control software for their amps. 0 tuning. No delays, no EQ, no nothing. And it's a 8-box side Q, which is a bit bigger than that. No flown subs, and 4 B2s, which are very big, in a different position, farther left and right. So there's a lot of delay issues there, a lot of tuning things there, but I don't expect any of my engineers to know how to set those delays or tune them. I do expect them to know that there is no tuning and to learn how to compensate. So one of our engineers who came in and has no experience tuning but has a lot of experience mixing quickly had to learn to not worry about it, let me handle it, and just do the best that she could do. And she's a phenomenal mix engineer. But as soon as she got over that, she was much less stressed. If it's tuned, if it's got presets or whatever, typically a venue will have a graphic at front of house or a tablet there for your operators to tune to taste, okay? If that's not there, I just use whatever's on my digital console if I have it. The parametric on the left, right, or whatever, and I'll tune to taste. Know what your limits are. Again, Belasco Theater, where we are in LA, it's got lots of B2s. Those B2s are all blown. It's a dance club. It happens. So instead of trying to push the low end that I want to hear, I'm going to compensate and address my low end a little bit higher in where I want to put it tone-wise. I'm not going to try and blow those already blown speakers because all I'm going to do is fry power supplies and amplifiers. All of my engineers know this too. So they're not going to push what they're not going to get when we get them fixed or when the venue gets them fixed. All of that opens up and they have more low end to play with, which is always a good thing. My mentor talks about the parable of the subs. He says 2 subs for every top box, which is a bit excessive, but it's always fun to play with. I tune using a speaking or a worship leader mic. Okay, I will grab one of our wireless mics because we use all UHFR, ULXD. It's Beta 58 all around. So I'll grab that, I'll go to front of house, I'll talk. And I will listen for the room. And I'll listen for the room to respond when I talk. It will ring. I will minimize those rings. When I can get the PA tuned without any EQ on my speaking or singing mic, I know I'm good to go. I don't use reference tracks anymore. Excuse me. Because I found that they boxed me in. Most reference tracks are mastered with really low dynamic range, really high RMS. They push constant voltage across the frequencies into the room, and you will more often get broadband ring than you will room modes. It'd be harder to tell them apart. I have a couple that I still use from time to time to check things like, oh, I wish I actually could play these for you. This is a good idea. I should have played them for you. There's one song I'll listen to the first 15 seconds of because there's a kick drum that hits, and it tells me really quickly what my kick drums are going to do in the room. I listen to a Brooke Fraser song that I like for mid-range. It's flags. There's a group choir or group vocal set in there, and that's all I want to hear. I could literally cut these bits out of these songs and run them in a quick playlist because all I'm doing is listening for unique things in each song that I know do certain things in rooms. I don't rely on them. I just use them as a last-ditch effort to make sure I'm good. The goal, like I said, is to minimize the room's contribution to what you're doing. Okay? You're never going to get rid of it. You're just going to minimize it. When we mix it lower volumes, so at Hillsong, I get asked, how loud do you run? Well, it's a subjective problem because they're questioning because dB is, you need a reference, you need to know what weighting you're at, You need to know what average level you're at to know what weighting you're at. Fast or slow, lots of variable sets. So, but a short answer is 108 to 110, C weighted, slow. Okay? Once you cross over 85, you're supposed to switch to C. Okay? And 85 is quite low, relatively speaking. So when I go to a venue and they go, your limit's 94A, I go, great, I know what that is. It's about, I think it's about 100C or 104C, something like that. Usually those are placed there because there was complaints and things like that. But when they say 94A, I gently correct them and go, okay, at that point you should be actually looking at C. Takes more low end into account. But when you mix at lower volumes, what you're looking to do is contribute to what's coming off the stage, and sometimes the room does that. At Belasco Theater, there's like a 400 hertz ring. There's a giant cavity above the stage, huge. So you can fly trusses all the way up. You can fly the screen all the way up. It goes behind the proscenium, which is that lip in front of the stages, and it creates a giant reverb cavity. There's no damping up there. There's no acoustic treatment. There's no panel. There's no nothing. So I pull a lot of 400 out so that whatever the room contributes, I'm not adding to it and overexciting that. I want the other frequencies to balance out with what the room is doing. When I mixed on our front of house team at Hillsong Conference in Sydney, I was doing all of our backing tracks, which were very clean, very impactful things. There was low-end hits in there that were massive. I had to tune very tight frequencies out, so when those things hit, the big arena with a 5.6 second reverb time didn't ring 40 hertz for 5.6 seconds. So I had to cut that out real hard so I would get 40 hertz, but it would be just enough so the room would be contributing it for what we were supposed to be hearing. Okay? Big deal. I didn't really mean to go that much in detail, but hopefully it helped. Mic placement, man. I'm probably going to fly through this because I have a story that'll take up all the time. I mixed our Counterfest once. It was my first releasing gig where they were like, do what you want. What do you want to hire in? I went, yes, I want more subs. So I hired in 4 more subs, and Galileo to process it was all Meyer. And I spent a lot of time. We moved the subs to the stage. I end-fired them, 4 in a line, which if you don't know what end-firing is, don't worry about it. It just cardioids the subs and forces the low frequencies around a certain frequency to hit hard in a cardioid pattern or a hypercardioid pattern. Spent about an hour tuning the room, walking, tuning. Then I spent about an hour placing mics because the band was there, we were hanging out, we had nothing to do before it started. I was able to mix the entire show with no EQ. Just what I put on the PA. By placing my mics and tuning my PA, I had no EQ on any channel for the 4-day conference. It was fantastic. Never been able to do that since because I didn't have the prep time, but yeah, amazing. Headroom. Does anybody have this problem where you run into the red real quick? Yeah? Anybody gone back to the amp room and seen your amp style back? Does that happen anywhere? Or is it just me? Used to. Yeah. So my mentor taught me real quick, turn your amps up. Make sure your crossover volumes are set where they need to be because that'll mess with your tuning, but turn your amps up. If you clip your consoles going into your amps, you'll blow speakers. You want your analog to clip. You don't want your digital to clip. If you run out of headroom, you run out of clarity. I find things start to fight with each other. You get less dynamic range. Consoles will kind of saturate. Mixed buses will saturate. You run out of headroom. You run out of clarity. You run out of punch. Faders. Do you know does everybody know what logarithmic means with faders? Okay, as you get to 0, the 5 dB around 0, or unity gain on a fader, is about yay big. As you go above and below that, to get 5 dBs, it's yay big. Okay, so if you're running your faders all the way down the bottom, you make a little adjustment, it's a huge adjustment. Okay, so if you pull your gains back, run your system where your faders are at unity, you have maybe an inch and a half, depending on your fader, for a full sweep. Okay, that's headroom. It's your friend. When I have a 5-year-old come up to a console and grab it, if I'm not on a digital console, I can walk back up after that, going to pray and look at my faders and go, oh, go back up to Unity. I'm good to go. Set. Some preamps, usually the higher end ones, SSL, Midas, the expensive ones, they usually sound better at full scale, so you would want to attenuate them up, let them get into the yellow, and then pull back somewhere else. Usually there's an attenuator on the Midas Pro series, or things like that. Yamaha and others at the not so uber expensive scale sound great half scale, okay? I was taught by an old school guy on a new school console a trick I had never thought. I learned on a 5D, which was one of those consoles you want to run hot. Mix on an M7 for probably 1,000 services. Get to New York, Manhattan Center. This old guy comes and goes, hey, have you ever tried to run your preamps on your Yamaha console at half scale? Or don't use your trim? Just turn the gain up till it's good for the room? No. Oh, you should do it. Sounds really good. I didn't believe him. I tried it. He was right. I was wrong. Yamaha sounds really good when you don't run them hot. Proper gain staging can reduce the amount of work you do. So, does everybody know what Fletcher-Munson is? Familiar with noise curves? Your ear is not linear. It hears frequencies at, yes, 5 minutes, thank you. All right, I'm going to have to speed this up a little bit. So there's a lot of philosophy, not practical, sorry. You need more power at low frequencies and really high frequencies to hear at the same level that you would in around 2K, okay? Your ear is tuned for vocals. So when you turn something up really loud, typically it gets bright. And even though there's a linear power to the low end and the high end, it sounds brighter and harsher to you because you're more sensitive in those frequencies. Also, the louder you get, sort of that curve flattens out a little bit, but you're always sensitive at 2K, right around there, center there. When you gain something up for the house, it will change how it sounds. So what you want to do is you want to gain it up and get it to a point where it's the right level. If you're not getting the right level, you'll start to hear what frequencies are going to be your problem frequencies. And that's a good, quick tip for EQ. If you don't want to sit there and hunt and you don't want to, like figure things out like that, just gain up. As it gets to the right level, if it's too woolly, gently pull back your low end. If it's too bright, gently pull back your top end. And I do that, and almost every time I do that, I'm happy. When I'm really, really in a pinch and I have to gain fast, like if I'm working with another operator and I'm on single gain, I'm the master, he's the slave. I have to gain really quick and hope he gets the right level. I have to work harder on the EQ, and EQ is not necessarily my friend. I want less of it. I don't have the time to go into it, but the more EQ you do, the more phase problems you have, the less intelligibility you have. The less EQ you do, the more clarity you have, the more punch you have, the better things sound. So you're working towards less EQ. EQ on your system, the one spot, reduce EQ everywhere else. Compressors mess with gain staging. They raise noise floors. You should really turn them off until you're ready to use them if you need them. Okay? There's churches I've gone to where they've have too much feedback, not enough level. Sounds counterproductive, sounds like it doesn't make sense. What they're doing is their compressors are slamming stuff, bringing their noise floors back up, their mics are going into feedback. As soon as they talk into them, compressor slams it back down again. Walk into the church, pull all the compressors off. Boom. Everything's too loud, pull it back, no feedback. I wish I could go into a little bit more about some of this stuff. I might make some of this available online through maybe the AVL Facebook page. So I've got, real quick, I've got some stuff on EQ here, some stuff that I EQ, like I said before. I do go into some compressors and things, some effects, keep it simple. Don't overdo it. Again, young engineers tend to overdo it. As soon as you go to an MC spot or a prayer moment or the worship leader makes a call and you hear that call 3 or 4 times, let's sing out, sing out, sing out, sing out. People are going, okay, you told me once, now I hear it 4 times. Okay, another hallmark of beginning engineers. I've got a delay fader I ride. I slam it down as soon as I hear a call, and it just shuts the delay right off real quick. It's also the fader I can ride up for a delay throw. a lot of young and free stuff. Our crowd adds things, so when they add a word and they sing it off time after, I'll throw that up. So yeah, I've got lots in here, and I would have loved to have gone over it, but I'm running out of time. I'll make this available. I'll get with Dennis and I'll do that. I'm going to hand back to you.